Hello, my name is Moish Steigman, the Mindful Rabbi, and today we are going to be talking about hope amid fear, the power of listening. Before we do that, for anyone who knows the prayer, the Shema prayer central to Judaism, I invite you to sing it with me briefly. Shema Israel, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about the Shema prayer, so central, so important to Judaism. The first word of the prayer, Shema, means listen, hear. The idea of listening is core and central to Judaism. In fact, the word Shema itself appears nearly 100 times in the book of Deuteronomy, in the book of Devarim. And indeed, this idea has become part of our common English parlance. If you and I are having a conversation and you're sharing something, and I want to communicate to you that I get it, what might I say? I hear you. This is my way. This is our way of communicating one to the other, that I hear you, that I understand you, that I get you. And indeed, this concept of listening is central as we learn in Eruvin, in the Talmud. We read in Eruvin that Rabbi Abba said that Shmuel said, for 3 years Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagreed. This is the famous and renowned house of Shammai and the famous and renowned house of Hillel, the two leading houses and teachers of the time of the Talmud, nearly 2,000 years ago. And there were those who said that the halakha, that the law, is in accordance with the opinion of one house, and those who said that the halakha was in accordance with the opinion of the other house. And they would debate back and forth until ultimately a divine voice emerged and proclaimed, both these and those are the words of the living God, yet the halakha is in accordance with the house of Beit Hillel. In other words, both the opinion of Shammai and the opinion of Hillel and their houses were considered valid. But ultimately, according to the Talmud, we deferred to the house of Hillel. The Talmud, the Gemara then asks, since both these and these are the words of the living God, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim achayim, why were Beit Hillel privileged to have the Jewish law established in accordance with their opinion? The reason is that they were agreeable and forbearing, teaching both their own statements and the statements of Beit Shammai. Moreover, they first taught the statements of Beit Shammai before their own. This is such a powerful text and teaching in Judaism, that there were two houses competing in their opinions and viewpoints and explanations of Jewish law. But it was Beit Hillel that showed kindness and deference and graciousness to Beit Shammai, even teaching the ideas of Beit Shammai before their own. Now, this didn't mean that Beit Hillel had to agree with Beit Shammai. No, not at all. But rather, even the course of deep debate and divide, Beit Hillel had the capacity to show graciousness and understanding to Beit Shammai, with whom they were in direct opposition. The reality is that entrenchment is dangerous. Being so wrought up in your ideas, being so convinced that you are right and that the other is wrong, so much so that you cannot even listen to them, that you cannot even seek to understand, that you dismiss not only their ideas, but also them as people. That is such a dangerous and fearful notion. It was maybe 15 years ago or so that I was invited to speak on a panel, maybe even longer, 18, 20 years ago. And one of the questions put to the panelists is, what is the greatest division within Judaism today? And I can't even recall what the other panelists said, but I remember my answer. I answered that the greatest divider in Judaism is Israel. It's the third rail, and it never used to be the case. I wasn't alive in 1948. I wasn't alive in 1967. But those were times when Israel was the great uniter among Jews. In 1948, when Israel was a state. In 1967, amidst war, those were the times that Jews came together, that Jews rallied together, not only in support of Israel, but in support of one another in community. But even 15 or 18 years ago, when I was talking, and I think it's even more so the case today, Israel is now the great divider. It's the taboo topic, the one thing that we as Jews cannot talk about in community, because the disagreement is rampant and the dismissiveness even greater. Not only do we disagree with each other, but I cannot even be in the same room with you, given what you think and what you believe. The greatest infighting among Jews now is how to think about, how to talk about, and how to create some semblance of peace in and around our viewpoints about Israel. We know that very different views exist about Israel, and certainly about the war in Israel and in Gaza today. And even more than any time that I can recall in my lifetime, entrenchment is no longer the extremes, but rather the norms. I believe what I believe, and I cannot listen to anyone who thinks or feels differently. Think about where you fall right now after the horrific attacks by Hamas on October 7th and the month following with the siege and the war in Gaza. Think about your reaction to the words and the language I used. If you'd use the same words or the same language, think about your emotions in and around that. Because I think most of us feel so strongly and so passionately that we have fallen into the binary of I agree or I disagree. You're right, you're wrong. I want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you. And you make sense or you're off your rocker. Entrenchment is so incredibly dangerous because we stop listening. We stop believing Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim hachayim. We stop following the principle of Shema. And we start dismissing not only the ideas and opinions of each other, but also denying each other's humanity, decency, and dignity. So what is the antidote to entrenchment? How do we combat this morass in our midst? The only answer is through Shema, is through listening. Now let me be clear. Listening is not the same thing as agreeing. I remember years ago when my son was about 2.5 or 3, he asked me something, and I don't even remember what it was, but I remember saying no. And he said, Dad, you're not listening to me. And I said, of course I am. I hear exactly what you're saying. You want to do this, this, and this. And I'm saying, no, I'm listening to you. And my son Matan was getting more and more frustrated. Dad, you're not listening to me. That's not what I'm at. That's not it. You're not listening. And I said, of course I am. Here's what you want. I'm saying no. He got more frustrated. I got more frustrated. Until it finally dawned on me. And I said, Matan, when you hear the word listening, do you expect me to agree with you and say yes and do what you want? And he said, yes. Yes, that's to him as a 2-year-old, as a 3-year-old, what listening meant. When we listen to someone, we have when someone listens to us, we have the expectation that they'll agree with us, that they'll buy into what we're saying or doing. That's not what listening means. I can be in a space of deep listening, hear you, honor you, validate your different opinion, and acknowledge your right to have it, and perhaps even your wisdom. But it doesn't mean I have to agree. It doesn't mean I have to buy into it. It doesn't mean I have to move my needle far, a lot, or even a little bit at all. What listening means is that I am honoring you. I am acknowledging that you have a perspective, a narrative, a truth that might be different from mine. And just because we might hold different narratives and perspectives and truths doesn't mean you as an individual are any less thoughtful, purposeful, or mindful than I am. We might not walk away from each other with any place of common thinking, but hopefully we walk away from each other with with each of our dignity still intact, and even a deeper and growing bond and connection with the other person. I've said before, I don't have the solution to what's going on now in Israel and in Gaza. I don't have the solution for how to create sense of peace, lasting peace, peace that is not simply an end to the fighting and violence and hostages now, including a return to the hostages. I don't have a solution, but I deeply believe that entrenchment is not the way to go. Demanding that you and that everyone agree with my perspective wholly and fully, and that my way is the only way, at best, and at a high, painful best and cost of human life, at best, might get us to stop the violence temporarily and return the hostages. At best. But this would be temporary and long-lasting. And we know that this cycle will perpetuate or continue in a different form. What we need now is to open up our hearts and our minds and our bodies and our being. We need to practice Shema, this Jewish time-honored central value of listening. That is how we break down entrenchment, and that is how we combat fear. I need to be able to hear you and to honor you, with you not as a threat, but rather you as a dignified, valuable person. I'd like to conclude with a poem by Yehuda Amichai, The Place Where We Are Right. From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow. And a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. And so it is my hope, my prayer, and my bracha, and my blessing that we're able to let a little bit of doubt enter ourselves and enter our entrenched positions, that we're able to deeply, truly cherish the ideas of each other, the dignity of each other, that we can truly open our minds, our bodies, our hearts, our souls, and in our entire being to deep listening with one another. And in doing so, may we restore the idea that each of us is truly a person created in God's image, with inherent dignity and self-worth. And may we carry that into our dialogues and our decisions in the future.